The morning mist hung low over Anglesea's rugged coastline as Prince William stepped out of the black Range Rover. The October wind carried the sharp scent of seaweed and salt, whipping through his dark navy coat. Behind him, a convoy of security vehicles stretched along the narrow coastal road, their occupants scanning the horizon with practiced vigilance. Local police had cordoned off a section of Newborough Beach, but already hundreds of people pressed against the barriers. Welsh flags fluttered in the breeze alongside Union Jacks, creating a colorful backdrop against the gray morning sky. Children perched on their fathers' shoulders, clutching small flags and homemade signs with messages of welcome. William paused for a moment, adjusting his scarf against the biting wind. This was his first official visit to this particular stretch of Welsh coast since becoming Prince of Wales, and the significance wasn't lost on him. The title carried deep historical weight, connecting him to centuries of Welsh heritage and royal tradition. Margaret Evans, the local council chairwoman, hurried forward to greet him. Her cheeks were already pink from the cold, and she pulled her wool coat tighter as she approached. "Your Royal Highness," she said with a slight curtsy. "Welcome to Anglesea. The community is absolutely thrilled you've chosen to visit us." William smiled warmly, extending his hand. "Thank you, Margaret. It's wonderful to be here, despite the rather brisk weather." His breath formed small clouds as he spoke, and he glanced toward the growing crowd with genuine interest. The beach stretched for miles in both directions, dotted with ancient driftwood and scattered rocks worn smooth by countless tides. In the distance, the mountains of Snowdonia created a dramatic backdrop, their peaks shrouded in low-hanging clouds. This was Wales at its most beautiful and raw, a landscape that had shaped generations of hardy coastal people. Security officers moved discreetly into position as William began walking toward the crowd. Detective Inspector Sarah Jones, his personal protection officer for this visit, maintained a careful distance while keeping her eyes on the enthusiastic gathering. She had worked dozens of royal visits, but there was something special about Welsh crowds. They were warm, genuine, and utterly unpredictable in their enthusiasm. The barriers held back a sea of faces, young and old, all eager for a glimpse of their Prince of Wales. Mrs. Bronwyn Thomas, 83 years old and wrapped in her late husband's fishing jacket, had been waiting since dawn. She clutched a photograph of herself meeting Prince Charles during his 1981 visit, determined to add another royal encounter to her collection of memories. "I've brought my grandson all the way from Cardiff," she told the woman beside her, nodding toward a shy boy of about 10 who peered out from behind her skirt. "David needs to understand his Welsh heritage, and seeing the prince is part of that education." Young David held a small Welsh dragon flag, its red fabric snapping in the constant wind. He had never seen a real prince before, and his imagination ran wild with stories his grandmother had told him about royal visits and ancient Welsh legends. The crowd's excitement grew palpable as William approached. Camera phones emerged from pockets and bags, though many people simply watched with their own eyes, wanting to experience the moment directly rather than through a screen. The atmosphere was electric but respectful, a testament to the deep affection the Welsh people held for the monarchy. William stopped at the first section of barriers, immediately drawn to a group of school children from the local primary school. Their teacher, Miss Jennifer Phillips, had organized the trip as part of their history lesson about Welsh royalty. 25 children ages 6 to 11 stood in neat rows, their school uniforms hidden beneath thick coats and scarves. "Good morning, children," William said, crouching down to their eye level. "Are you keeping warm on this chilly morning?" A chorus of excited voices responded, some in English, others in Welsh. 8-year-old Saris Williams stepped forward boldly, her dark curls escaping from her knit hat. "Bor da, Tywysog William," she said clearly, having practiced the Welsh greeting for weeks. William's face lit up with delight. "Bor da, Saris," he replied, his pronunciation careful but accurate. "Your Welsh is much better than mine, I'm afraid." The children giggled and Saris beamed with pride. She had been chosen by her classmates to present the prince with a special gift, a wooden carved dragon made by her grandfather, a local craftsman. The dragon was small enough to fit in a palm, its intricate details showing hours of careful work. "This is for you," Saris said, holding out the carving with both hands. "My Tade made it. He says dragons protect Wales and everyone who belongs here." William accepted the gift with genuine appreciation, turning it over in his hands to examine the craftsmanship. "Please tell your grandfather that this is beautiful work. I'll treasure it always." Miss Phillips watched with satisfaction as her students interacted with the prince. This was exactly the kind of experience that would stay with them forever, connecting them to their heritage in a way no textbook ever could. She had taught in this community for 15 years and understood how important moments like this were for building pride and connection to Welsh identity. The wind picked up, sending sand skittering across the beach and making everyone pull their coats tighter. William seemed unfazed by the weather, moving along the barriers with easy confidence. He paused to speak with elderly residents, young families, and everyone in between, each conversation brief but meaningful. Local photographer Rhys Morgan positioned himself carefully to capture the scene. He had covered royal visits for the regional newspaper for over 20 years, but this felt different somehow. The prince seemed more relaxed here, more genuinely engaged with the people and the place. Perhaps it was the wild beauty of the Welsh coast, or maybe it was the authentic warmth of the crowd. But there was something special happening on this wind-swept beach. As William continued along the barriers, the crowd's enthusiasm never wavered despite the challenging weather. This was just the beginning of what promised to be a memorable visit to the Welsh shores. 20 minutes into his walkabout, Prince William encountered the most boisterous section of the crowd. A group of rugby supporters from the local Caernarfon RFC had arrived wearing their team scarves and singing traditional Welsh songs. Their voices carried across the beach, mixing with the sound of crashing waves and seagulls overhead. Captain Gareth Hughes, a former Welsh international player now in his 60s, stood at the front of the group. His weathered hands gripped the barrier as he watched the prince approach. Gareth had represented Wales in 2 World Cups and understood the weight of national pride that came with wearing the red dragon. "Your Royal Highness," Gareth called out as William drew near, "we've brought something special for you from the club." William paused, intrigued by the group's obvious passion. The rugby supporters had arranged themselves in formation, their scarves creating a sea of red and gold. Behind them, wives and children added to the colorful display, many wearing traditional Welsh costume elements despite the modern setting. "What have you brought for me?" William asked, genuinely curious about what the rugby club might have prepared. Gareth reached into a large sports bag and carefully withdrew a pristine Wales rugby jersey. But this wasn't just any jersey. It bore the signatures of every Welsh international player from the past 50 years. The signatures covered the front and back in various inks, creating a tapestry of Welsh rugby heritage. "This represents 5 decades of Welsh rugby excellence," Gareth explained, his voice carrying the pride of a man who had devoted his life to the sport. "Every signature tells a story of battles fought on rugby pitches around the world." William accepted the jersey with obvious appreciation, holding it up to examine the countless signatures. He recognized many of the names, legends like Gareth Edwards, Phil Bennett, and more recent heroes like Alan Wynne-Jones. The jersey represented not just sport, but the very essence of Welsh fighting spirit. "This is extraordinary," William said, his voice carrying genuine emotion. "The dedication and passion that Welsh rugby represents is something truly special. Thank you for this incredible gift." The rugby supporters erupted in cheers, their voices mixing Welsh and English in a celebration that echoed across the beach. Several began singing Hen Wlad Fai Nadau, the Welsh national anthem, their voices strong despite the wind attempting to carry the words away. As the singing continued, William noticed an elderly woman sitting in a wheelchair slightly apart from the main crowd. Mrs. Megan Lloyd, 91 years old, had been brought by her great-granddaughter, but hadn't been able to get close to the barriers due to her mobility limitations. Without hesitation, William stepped away from the main crowd and walked directly toward Mrs. Lloyd. His security detail moved smoothly to accommodate the unexpected direction change, maintaining their protective formation while allowing the spontaneous interaction. "Hello there," William said gently, crouching beside her wheelchair so they could speak at eye level. "I'm sorry you couldn't get closer to the barriers. How long have you been waiting?" Mrs. Lloyd's eyes brightened immediately. Despite her age, her mind remained sharp, and she had been watching the proceedings with keen interest. "Oh, Your Royal Highness," she said in accented English. "I've been here since my great-granddaughter Emma brought me at 8:30. I wouldn't have missed this for the world." Emma, a university student studying in Cardiff, stood proudly beside her great-grandmother. She had driven up early that morning specifically to ensure Mrs. Lloyd could attend this historic visit. "Nine has lived through so many changes in Wales," Emma explained, using the Welsh word for grandmother. "She wanted to meet you to represent our whole family." Mrs. Lloyd reached out with a slightly trembling hand, which William gently took in both of his. "I've lived in this village for 70 years, she told him, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "I've seen 3 princes of Wales visit our shores, and each time it fills my heart with such pride." "Tell me about those visits," William encouraged, genuinely interested in her perspective on royal history. Mrs. Lloyd's eyes took on a distant quality as she remembered. "Prince Charles came in 1981, just after his wedding to Lady Diana. The whole village turned out, just like today. Before that, my mother told me stories about the Duke of Windsor visiting before the war. But this," she gestured toward the enthusiastic crowd, "this feels the most special of all." William spent several more minutes with Mrs. Lloyd, learning about her life in the village, her late husband's work as a fisherman, and her large extended family scattered across Wales. Her stories painted a picture of Welsh coastal life spanning nearly a century, through wars, economic changes, and social transformation. The wind continued to buffet the beach, but the crowd's enthusiasm never wavered. Local business owners had set up small stalls selling hot tea and traditional Welsh cakes, their aromas mixing with the salt air. The vendors donated their proceeds to local charities, turning the royal visit into a community fundraising event. Dr. Amanda Roberts, a marine biologist from Bangor University, had positioned herself strategically near the shoreline. She had brought a collection of specimens found on this particular beach, hoping to share information about Welsh coastal conservation with the prince. Her research focused on the impact of climate change on Welsh marine ecosystems, work that had gained national attention. When William noticed her scientific equipment and display boards, he immediately approached with interest. "Are you studying our Welsh waters?" he asked, examining the collection of shells, seaweed samples, and research photographs. "Yes, Your Royal Highness," Dr. Roberts replied enthusiastically. "This coastline supports some of the most diverse marine life in Britain. We're documenting changes in species distribution due to warming sea temperatures." William listened intently as Dr. Roberts explained her research, asking thoughtful questions about conservation efforts and the role of local communities in protecting marine environments. Their conversation drew other visitors closer, creating an impromptu educational session about Welsh coastal ecology. The morning progressed with William moving naturally between different groups, each interaction adding another layer to the rich tapestry of Welsh community life. Local artists displayed paintings of the coastline, musicians played traditional Celtic melodies, and historians shared stories about the area's connection to ancient Welsh princes. As the wind picked up even more, sending hats flying and forcing people to brace against the gusts, William showed no signs of wanting to cut the visit short. His genuine engagement with each person he met had created an atmosphere of warmth that seemed to defy the harsh weather conditions. The final hour of Prince William's visit brought unexpected drama to the Welsh shoreline. Dark clouds had been gathering throughout the morning, and now they released their contents in a sudden fierce downpour. Rain lashed the beach horizontally, driven by winds that had grown from brisk to genuinely challenging. Most dignitary visits would have concluded quickly under such conditions, with everyone seeking shelter in nearby buildings. But William surprised both his security team and the assembled crowd by refusing to retreat. Instead, he borrowed an umbrella from Margaret Evans and continued his interactions, seemingly energized by the wild Welsh weather. "This is proper Welsh weather," he called out to the crowd, his voice carrying over the wind and rain. "If we can't handle a bit of rain, we're not truly Welsh, are we?" The crowd responded with cheers and laughter, their spirits lifted by his determination to continue despite the conditions. Parents pulled children closer, sharing umbrellas and creating impromptu shelters, but nobody left. This had become something more than a royal visit. It was a shared experience of Welsh resilience against the elements. Young Tommy Price, a 7-year-old from the local primary school, had been clutching his handmade welcome sign for over 2 hours. The cardboard was now soggy and beginning to disintegrate, but his determination remained unshaken. His mother, Sarah, had suggested they head home when the rain started, but Tommy refused to leave. "The prince might want to see my sign," he insisted, his small voice barely audible over the weather. His sign read, "Welcome Prince William," in uneven letters, decorated with drawings of the Welsh dragon and Caernarfon Castle. William noticed the boy's dedication as he approached their section of the crowd. Tommy stood pressed against the barrier, rain dripping from his hood, still holding his deteriorating sign with pride. The sight touched William deeply. This child's determination to participate, despite the challenging conditions, embodied the Welsh spirit he had come to admire. "Is that sign for me?" William asked, crouching down to Tommy's level and angling his umbrella to provide some shelter for both of them. Tommy nodded enthusiastically, holding up the sign despite its bedraggled state. "I made it specially for you, Prince William. It took me 3 days because I wanted the dragon to look proper Welsh." William studied the artwork carefully, noting every detail despite the rain threatening to wash away the remaining colors. "This is magnificent work, Tommy. Your dragon looks fierce and proud, just like Wales herself. Would you like me to sign something for you?" Tommy's eyes widened in amazement. He hadn't expected this possibility and fumbled in his pocket for something the prince could sign. His mother helped him produce a small notebook, its pages slightly damp but still usable. "To Tommy, with thanks for the excellent Welsh dragon. Stay proud of Wales, Prince William," he wrote carefully, shielding the notebook with his umbrella to protect the ink from the rain. The interaction created a ripple effect through the crowd. Other children pressed forward with items to be signed, creating a spontaneous signing session in the middle of the storm. Parents held umbrellas over the prince and their children, creating a patchwork of temporary shelters along the barrier line. Detective Inspector Sarah Jones watched with professional concern as the weather continued to deteriorate. Her responsibility was the prince's safety, and these conditions pushed the boundaries of what she considered acceptable for a public engagement. However, she could see that William was completely in his element, energized by the authentic Welsh experience unfolding around him. The local Coast Guard station, located just beyond the beach, had been monitoring the situation. Captain David Williams, the station commander, approached Margaret Evans with an offer to provide emergency shelter if needed. His team had prepared the station's community room with heating and refreshments, expecting the royal party might need to take refuge. "The prince seems determined to continue," Margaret told Captain Williams, rainwater streaming from her umbrella. "I've never seen anything quite like it. He's actually enjoying this weather." Captain Williams smiled grimly. He had spent 30 years on these waters and understood the power of Welsh storms. Well, he's showing proper respect for our country by not running at the first sign of rough weather. That'll be remembered here for a long time." As if to punctuate his words, a particularly strong gust of wind sent several umbrellas flying across the beach. The crowd laughed and cheered as people chased after their escaped protection, turning the challenging conditions into a source of shared amusement. William continued moving along the barriers, now completely soaked despite his coat and umbrella. His hair was plastered to his head, and his clothes clung damply to his frame, but his enthusiasm never wavered. He stopped to speak with the Reverend Mayor Davies from the local Methodist chapel, who had brought members of her elderly congregation despite the weather. "Reverend Davies," William said, shaking hands warmly despite their mutual dampness, "I'm impressed by your congregation's dedication to be here in these conditions." "Your Royal Highness," she replied with a twinkle in her eye, "we Welsh have been worshipping in all weathers for centuries. A bit of rain isn't going to keep us from welcoming our Prince of Wales." The final moments of the visit became legendary among those present. As William prepared to leave, the entire crowd spontaneously began singing Calon Len, a beloved Welsh hymn about having a pure heart. Their voices rose above the storm, creating a moment of profound beauty amid the chaos of wind and rain. William stood motionless for several minutes, listening to the hymn with obvious emotion. The combination of the stirring melody, the dramatic weather, and the genuine warmth of the Welsh people created a moment he would never forget. When the song ended, he applauded enthusiastically, his gesture nearly lost in the storm, but deeply appreciated by those who saw it. As he finally walked back toward his waiting vehicle, William turned for one last look at the crowd. Despite the torrential conditions, hundreds of people remained, waving flags and cheering through the rain. Children sat on shoulders, elderly residents huddled under shared umbrellas, and teenagers recorded videos with rain-spotted phone screens. The image would become iconic, a future king completely drenched but undaunted, having shared an authentically Welsh experience with his people. Local newspapers would run headlines about "the prince who stayed," and the story would be told in the village for generations to come. William paused at his car door, raising his hand in final acknowledgement of the remarkable crowd. The wind caught his gesture, and for a moment it seemed as if he was conducting the storm itself. Then he was gone, leaving behind a community forever changed by a royal visit that had become an unforgettable celebration of Welsh character and resilience.